What up, Wizards? It's the Dirty D from Mtg. We like it in Magic, and today we got a whole bunch of Innistrad Midnight Hunt spoilers for you. They really went ham today. There's like 36 cards to talk about, so I really shouldn't be jacking my jaw wasting time talking at the beginning of the video. We've got a lot to go over, so let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, let's start with some limited playables and kind of work our way up to the hype stuff, but we won't be in limited playables too long today because there's a ton of hype stuff. But let's take a look real quick at Duel for Dominance, Odric's Outrider, and I guess Falcon Wrath Perforator, because I really like this name. Perforator is just a 2-mana, 1 and a red, 2/1 vampire, and when it attacks, it deals a damage to defending player. It's actually not terrible, but it's probably not good enough for standard play either. The cool thing about this, though, is that in limited and, again, possibly even in standard, if you need this that bad, it does activate the if an opponent is lost life trigger on a lot of these vampires that we see. So this will probably be a pretty valuable 2-drop for certain decks in draft. Duel for the D is 2 mana, 1 and a green for an instant. It's got Coven. Choose target creature you control, target creature you don't control. If you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, put a +1/+1 counter on the chosen creature you control. Then the chosen creatures fight each other. So a nice little, relatively aggressively costed, instant speed fight thing here that you have to have Coven to make really pop off, but I don't think it's actually going to be that hard to get Coven in limited after seeing a good bit of the set at this point. I mean, there's a bunch of creatures that put the Decayed Zombies into play, so that's, 2/3 of Coven right there. And you've got some other creatures that put, like, 1/1s into play. So again, like, 2/3 of Coven on one guy is actually pretty common in this set, so I don't think it's going to be too hard to fill the battlefield up with different powered creatures. There's also a number of ways to shift around power to help you keep Coven, and we haven't really talked much about that, but Odric's Outrider is a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. This is 3 and a white for a 2/4 human knight, and whenever it or another creature you control dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So it feels like an unruly mob, which we already know is reprinted in this set, but it feels like just a next level unruly mob. It does cost twice as much, but the stats are really good to start out, or at least acceptable. A 4-mana 2/4 is somewhat acceptable stats in limited. Not quite there, but at least this has the ability to get bigger, and if like one of your creatures does die, you get to keep some of its power on the battlefield. And whether that means you end up making Outrider itself huge, or one of your other creatures, or you spread the love, right? Like, this is actually kind of a really sweet card that makes sure that you can maintain board presence when you lose creatures, and there's kind of a lot of that going on in this set. Now up next I want to talk about Spellrune Painter and Spellrune Howler, and these could just be draftables, or they could actually be fairly good Magic cards. Painter is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/3 human shaman werewolf. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Painter gets +1/+1 till end of turn, and it's day bound. Howler, on the other hand, is a 3/4 werewolf, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and of course, the card is nightbound. This actually looks like very sweet, not only in limited, but like possibly in these spells decks. Now, you often don't want a spells matter creature to cost 3 mana and not be like unbelievably good, but this is actually pretty good. It's just got basic prowess on the front half, which isn't amazing, but if you can make it night, a 3/4 that becomes a 5 power guy, like a 5/6, and then a 7/8, and then possibly even a 9/10. Like, it's actually great if you can get this thing flipped over. So if there's some sort of red-blue or red-X spells deck that can actually make it day or night at will fairly easily, then like I wouldn't count this card out. This is actually a really sweet card on the back half, but I'll move on to Reckless Stormseeker. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/3 human werewolf. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains haste until end of turn, and this card is daybound. Stormcharge Slasher, the hash-slinging one, is 3/4. It's a werewolf, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. So, again, really sweet card here on the front half. You get what is kind of a 3 mana 3/3 on the turn that you play it. That can swing, by the way. 3 mana 3/3 haste. Haven't really seen Arnie Broken Brow do anything, but this can do a little bit more than Broken Brow, considering when you do get it flipped over, suddenly a dude gets +2/+0 and trample. Whole different ball game. Giving creatures trample is actually a really, really big deal. Trample's always a better ability than you think it is. So, especially on the back half, this is good, but this might be good enough on the front half to just play. It gives itself haste on the turn it comes into play, and then it gives your 4-drop haste and your 5-drop haste if it didn't already have it. if you're not playing Goldspan or something. So, I don't know. Giving it self-haste the turn it comes out, and then giving your creature a little boost and haste every turn after that. Like, not every creature you play for the rest of the game is going to have haste, because you might double spell, play 2 creatures in the same turn. But, effectively, as long as you're playing on curve, whatever creature you play for the rest of the game, so long as this is out, is going to have haste and higher power than it actually has. So, I don't know. I really like this in like a mono red deck or something, but it might not be quite there, I'll admit. Matter of fact, there's a couple of red cards today, and as a matter of fact, there's Rakdos cards today that I'm really not sure about, but I want to like Hungry for More. This is a black and a red for a sorcery. Create a 3/1 black and red vampire creature token with trample, lifelink, and haste. Sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. You can flash this back for 1, a black, and a red. So it's not terrible. It kind of reminds me of like Hellspark Elemental. Pretty sure it's just supposed to be Hellspark Elemental, but this one gains you life and tramples. That's good. It doesn't have Unearth, but it has Flashback, which is functionally the same thing on a card like this. So, I don't know. I think it's actually kind of cool. I do like that. Let's say you're playing Jund, right? You have an Asika's Chariot out. Then you can crew the Chariot and then copy this token. But the token doesn't get sacrificed at the end of end step. That's kind of cool if you can copy that token somehow. So, I don't know. I don't hate the card, but that seems like a lot of jumping through hoops for not enough value. Right? In the end, I'm not sure about this card. This could be like a burn spell, if you want to look at it that way, right? This is 2 mana for a 6-point life swing, what with the life link and all that. And then later on, if you can keep the board clear, or if the board is just still clear next turn, you get another 6-point life swing. So, like, I could see, again, in the right game, I could see this being a pretty decent card, but most of the time I'm just not actually too sure about it. I will say, you're giving your opponent an interesting decision, right? They have a werewolf pack leader out or something, and you play this on your turn 2 because you're on the draw. And so you swing with this, and not only you're presenting them with an option, they can block with the werewolf pack leader if they want to and lose their pack leader and not take any damage. You gain 3 life. Or they can take the 3 and let you gain 3. So when they swing with their werewolf pack leader next turn, it's almost like you negated that swing, right? Because you gained the 3 life. Like, I don't know, interesting play patterns with this card, especially in the early game. And then in the late game, once the board is clear, this can come back to kind of finish the job. There's some really cool things I like about this card, but I'm just not sure that it's there. I keep saying that, but I'm being honest with you. Now, a black-red card that I think I like even more, but I'm still not sure, is where you want to be all the time, is Wake to Slaughter. This is 3, a black, and a red for a sorcery. Choose up to 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. An opponent chooses one of them. Return that card to your hand. Return the other to the battlefield under your control. It gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. And you can flash this back for 4, a black, and a red. So this is almost never going to work the way you want it to, right? Like, I want, like, I want the Gristle brand, right? Like, I want the big reanimation target to hit the battlefield right now and be able to attack. That's the one your opponent's going to put in your hand, very likely because you can't cast it because you don't have the mana, right? And then they're going to let you have the doofier of the 2 creatures that they can actually deal with the attack. I hate that your opponent gets, like, literally any agency on this card whatsoever, but it does kind of feel, in a way, like unearth that guy, draw a card, right? Like, you don't get card advantage off of this because the creature that you actually get to reanimate dies at end of combat, but it could still be good enough under the right circumstances. But 5 mana is a lot, 6 mana is even more to flash it back. But the flashback on this might be key. Just the overwhelming your opponent with value might be the key here, because if you can cast this, get a card back in your hand, attack with a big dude they have to deal with somehow, and that makes them go down a body or 2 to block that creature. Or if it just makes them go down a bunch of life. And then next turn you play a land and you do this again, you're getting a lot of value. The problem, though, I guess, in that situation, is that you probably don't have any mana to cast the creatures that you're actually getting put into your hand by this card, right? But if your opponent survives getting hit by this once or twice, then they still have to survive getting hit by the creatures that they put into your hand themselves. So, maybe this is a little bit better than I think it is, but 5 mana does look really steep. Now, if you're looking for a card with flashback that I like, here's Sacred Fire. This is a lightning helix with flashback, sort of. This is a red and a white for an instant that deals 2 damage to any target, and you gain 2 life instead of 3, you see. But you can flash this back for 6 mana, 4, a red and a white. But I think that flashback is going to be worth it like a good bit of the time, like in some kind of Jeskai control deck or something like that, flashing this back might actually be great, even if you don't get to pick off a creature. You know, just gaining the 2 life might be worth it some of the time in the very late game when you're just trying to stay alive. But in the early game, picking off like your opponent's 2-drop and gaining the 2 life is like a huge deal for Jeskai control. So I really like this card. I've been wanting Lightning Helix back in Standard forever. And this is not Lightning Helix. A Bolt type thing would have been much, much better. But the fact that you get to cast it twice is kind of amazing, right? I mean, this does like 4 damage over the course of the game. And that's not enough to finish a game or anything. But late into the game, when you're finished with your, you know, your magma opuses and stuff like that, you've hit with a couple of Goldspan Dragons here or there, then I could actually see flashing this back and dealing the last 2 damage. Again, depending on how the game has gone up to that point. Big fan of this card. Can't wait to get my hands on it. So let's check out what I think is actually a really dangerous card. We're getting into some good stuff now. Here's Willow Guys, just a green mana for a 1/1 Treefolk Spirit with Trample. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Willow Geist. When Willow Geist dies, you gain life equal to its power. Alright, so I'm not sure like how quickly you can actually increase this thing's power. I mean, it's whenever 1 or more, so you can't just like, I don't know, like Tormod's Crypt, your graveyard away, and suddenly this guy gets huge for your 1 mana investment. You can't do that. But you can take cards out of your graveyard one by one, whether you're, you know, flashing them back or disturbing, or maybe you're just using effects that remove cards from graveyards one by one. We've seen a ton of those in this format, you know, cards that exile creatures from graveyards and whatnot. And those all happen one by one. So I could actually see being able to get like a critical mass of these effects into a deck. The only problem is you also have to put cards in your graveyard in the first place. You know, it's just, do you really have all the slots in your deck that you need to feed this card the way you want to? Is the when it dies gain a bunch of life effect really that good? Does it add that much gravy to the card? I'm not sure. Is it really slow to grow? Probably. So I don't think the card is like as, you know, banana bread as I want it to be. But if you pay 1 mana and this becomes like a 4/4 trample that gains you a bunch of life when it dies, like I think that's probably fine. The only problem is like, is it worth putting this card in your deck? Is it worth not only this card, but the, you know, the deck build? Is the entire deck worth building? Because the moment that you include this as a 4-of, your entire deck kind of has to be ways to put stuff into your graveyard, and then ways to extract it from your graveyard or exile it from your graveyard. And you know, you're gonna need like 12 to 16 cards that put stuff in the graveyard, and then you're gonna need a bunch of cards that get stuff out of the graveyard. Or whatever, you know. If you're just planning on like flashing back a bunch of cards or disturbing a bunch of creatures, that's fine, but it won't be till very late in the game that this gets big enough. So I don't know. I'm just not like super duper sure about it, but I want to be. I want to say that this is an amazing creature that's going to be a 5/5 before you know it. Start beating face, trampling over. Like, that's the reality I want, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible. Let's check out Curse of Surveillance here. This is 5 mana, 4 and a blue for an enchantment. It's a curse that enchants a player. At the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, any number of target players other than that player each draw cards equal to the number of curses attached to that player. I mean, come on, man. It's obviously worded for Commander, which is where people want to make curses work, it turns out. And this is just an incredible addition to anyone who wants to play a curses deck. You know, in Commander, this is just unbelievable. I'm not sure this sees any play in Standard. It is 5 mana. It doesn't really pay you off for it until you say go, and you've paid 5 mana, so you probably don't have the mana to take advantage of the card you drew on your opponent's turn. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. Seems a little bit slow for any real competitive format, but like Commander, on the other hand, if you are trying to meme with the Curses deck and you actually get this, not only do you get a bunch of cards, but everyone else at the table that you didn't enchant is going to love you and protect you. So that's a good thing. But let's move on to our next card, which is the Mask of Gristle brand, ladies and gentlemen. 3 mana, 1 and 2 black for a legendary equipment. Equipped creature has flying and lifelink. Whenever a equipped creature dies, you may pay X life, where X is its power. If you do, draw X cards. And you can equip this for 3. So this is probably not actually good. Just want to throw that out there. This is another possible commander playable, right? I mean, 3 mana and equip 3 is actually quite steep, but flying and lifelink are both really primo abilities in that format, and drawing X cards is always pretty desirable. Also like that, like, it's not just an aura or something. Like, they can blow up the creature. You draw like 3 or 4 cards. You have to pay life, yes, but hey, you have lifelink on your dude, so hopefully you gained enough life to where drawing 3 or 4 cards isn't so bad. But yeah, the creature dies, you draw 3 or 4 cards, you just throw this on another creature. It seems good, you know. I think it is like really expensive in standard to play this and then equip it, but again, could be worth it. Kind of reminds me of like a demonic embrace in a way, you know, and that card saw a little bit of play here and there during its standard tenure, depending on what the rest of the format was doing. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see this, but 6 mana to play and then attach, kind of a lot. Let's be honest, it's a bit much, but still, the amount of like actual value this gives you while the creature is attacking and after it dies, pretty high. So like I could see this as a one of depending on what your deck is doing, but it mostly looks like a commander playable and a sweet callback at that. There's a few rares today that don't look great, but I should at least point them out. And there's a couple of these rares that don't look amazing that I still really like and hope are good beyond against all odds, but this one is not one of those. This is Dire Strain Rampage. The DSR is 3 mana, 1 a red and a green for a sorcery. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. If a land was destroyed this way, its controller may search their library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Otherwise, its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. You can flash it back for 5 mana. So, in case you wanted to make this a Stone Rain, you're paying your opponent back 2 lands, because that is how afraid of Stone Rain Wizards is if you needed, you know, a signpost of some kind. How afraid of Stone Rain are they now? This afraid. Even though they'll put it in Historic. Historic can... I love that, man. Like, we won't reprint Stone Rain because it's a miserable play experience. I guess Historic can have it. What are you doing? Anyway, this card is probably bad, guys. And it is really flexible. You can blow up one of your own lands and go get 2 lands at sorcery speed. So there's that. We already have a card that does that in standard, but it does it at instant speed, Roiling Regrowth. So lame. But this also can blow up artifacts and enchantments. That's something I guess Rolling Regrowth can't do. So, you know, you can use it to ramp yourself, or you can use it to blow up your opponent's stuff. And you can flash it back, too. Doesn't seem terrible. Kind of seems terrible, though. I usually really value like flexibility on Magic cards, and this one has a lot of flexibility. You can do a lot with this card. Is it enough? Do you want it in your deck? You only have like 60 slots in your deck, and like 24 of those at least have to be lands. So you really only have like 36 slots in your deck. Is this one of them? I don't think so. So let's move on to Siphon Inside, one of my actual favorite cards from the whole day. But I'm not sold on this. This is 2 mana, a black and a blue for an instant. Look at the top 2 cards of target opponent's library. Exile one of them face down, put the other on the bottom of that library. You may look at and play the exiled card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. You can flash this back for 3 mana, 1 a blue and a black. So it's like a Dimir Think Twice in a way, right? You get to draw 2 cards off of this. The flashback lets you draw another one. But it's from your opponent's library. The thing about that, all right, traditionally, typically, the line from Magic players has been that you want your deck is the one you built, and you built it to synergize. You built it to interact with itself in some way or another. So drawing a card from your deck is almost always better than drawing a card from your opponent's deck. However, you get 2 looks here at instant speed for just 2 mana. You get 2 looks, you get the best card, which not only means that you get that card, you get to take it away from your opponent, which is kind of good. And then you flash it back later, you get something else. That's, honestly, the card doesn't look too bad. Not at all. You know, like the thing with Think Twice is that you got 2 looks altogether when you cast that card and then flashed it back. You get 4 looks with this card, which is way different. And again, I know you'd almost always rather be drawing from your own deck because, like, those are the cards you want to play. That's why you put them in your deck. They synergize with the other cards in your deck. Your opponent's cards are not necessarily guaranteed to synergize with what you're doing. But I will say, you could still get a Goldspan Dragon. You could get an Alrund's Epiphany. You could, you could get a Cyclone Summoner. You could get an Elite Spellbinder. You could get a Skyclave Apparition. There's just a million amazing cards seeing play right now. So, like, almost no matter what you end up with, probably going to be pretty decent. And let me look at how this card is worded real quick, just to make sure. You may look at and play the exiled card, so you can get lands. If it said cast, you couldn't get lands, or you couldn't play the lands either. Anyway, but since it says play, you can get lands off of this too, and like that's kind of good if you're looking for lands. There's just, I don't know, a lot that I like about this. It doesn't put the card into your hand; it exiles it, and you can play it anytime. So you just have it for the rest of the game. Your opponent can't make you discard it. Your opponent can't get it back somehow, and at least until you play the card. Then they can kill it and it goes into their graveyard. But still, you know what I'm saying? It's just, there's a lot that I really like about this. It protects the card forever for the rest of the game. You've got it. I don't know. I could see this being like a weird whiff some of the time, but I could also see this being like back-breaking a lot of the time too. Your opponent's looking for the sweeper. You found it. Your opponent's looking for the Goldspan. Well, you found it. Your opponent's looking for that Alrund's Epiphany. Well, I'm sorry, but I found it. So I don't know. I think this is better than a lot of people are saying that it is, but I'm still trying to like temper my expectations. Let's look at Vengeful Extermination next. This is 6 and 2 white for a sorcery that costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. Destroy all creatures. So 2 mana Wrath. I just wanted to meme real quick. I mean, it is a 2 mana Wrath sometimes. I can see board states where this effectively is. Like, the more trouble that you're in, the less this costs to cast. a lot of situations. Especially on turn 4, turn 5. You know, your opponent might cast a creature on turn 1, then a Clarion Spirit on turn 2, and then next turn they start going off and playing a bunch of creatures. At which point, this is easily, 4 mana to cast on your turn 4. If you play a creature, if on turn 2 you end up playing a creature, and your opponent plays a creature every turn up to then again, pretty easily, even if your opponent's just curving out, you can play this for 4 mana on turn 4, which is what you want the rate to be. But if your opponent goes like completely hog wild and plays a creature on 1, 2 creatures on 2, 3 creatures on turn 3, then what you do is you play this for extremely cheap on your next turn, and then they scoop the game because they're probably like out of cards in their hands. Like, this could be absolutely devastating against any sort of go wide deck where you could double spell, right? Like, if your opponent has like 8 guys on the battlefield, you cast this for 2 white mana and you get to do something else, like hold up a counter spell or cast to Behold the Multiverse or something. I just think this is actually a very, very powerful sweeper, and I know a lot of people have been kind of tempered on it. People have been like, oh, it's kind of good, probably costs 4 or 5 some of the time. If it costs 5, is that too slow? It might be too slow. No, I'm not that guy. I actually think this card is very powerful. And look, I know, because I've seen a bunch of people say this today, and it just blows my mind whenever I see this comment. People are like, oh, what if they don't have any creatures out? And it's like, well, I'm pretty sure any Wrath would be dead in that situation. It doesn't matter what the name on the Wrath is or how much it costs. If your opponent doesn't have any creatures, probably shouldn't have played that Wrath in your deck. So that's, just throw that out. Any Wrath is bad when your opponent doesn't have any creatures. But anyway, I think the card is actually very sweet. But let's look at Old Stick Fingers is the translation on this. I really hope that's the actual name of the card once we get the translation. Old Salad Fingers is a star for X, a black and a green. It's a legendary horror. When you cast this card, reveal the top card of your library until you reveal X creature cards. Put all the creature cards revealed this way into your graveyard. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Stick Fingers has power and toughness, each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. I just want to point this out because I think it's a sweet commander. I'm not sure how good the card actually is, all told. It's probably not great. I will say, late in the game you can cast this, and it's just a 2 mana giant dude. So like maybe that's good, right? Maybe it's best when you top deck it on turn 10, and it's enormous for only 2 mana. But ultimately, I want to like this more than I actually do. Like, part of me thinks it's just like the best Lurgoyf of all time. And then the other half is like, we are far past Lurgoyf abilities, especially when the guy doesn't have trample or anything. Like, why do you like this? And probably just because it's a cool card. It's a very cool card. Not sure how playable it is, but I will again point out it can be an 8/8 on turn whatever for just 2 mana. So maybe it's better than I think it is. But one of my favorite cards of the day, and we are getting to like the best cards of the day, is not even a rare. This is Sunset Festivities. This is 1 and a white for a sorcery. If an opponent has more life than you, you gain 4 life. If an opponent controls more creatures than you, create 2 1/1 white human creature tokens. If an opponent has more cards in hand than you, draw a card. So if you cast this card and your opponent's like, oh, what does that do? Just be like, everything. This card does everything. I really like it. It's like a timely reinforcement sort. It's like 2/3 of timely reinforcements. But this draws you a card, which is amazing. Really, really good. You have to meet a stipulation, but that's true of all of the, there's a point on this card where it literally does nothing. And you probably won't be happy to draw it when it does nothing, but you're also probably happy about the fact that it does nothing. Like, oh, I'm up in life, I'm up in creatures, I'm up in cards in my hand, so I guess I'm winning. If you draw this card and it does nothing, congratulations, you're winning the game. So I guess that's fine. And then it sits in your hand until you need to actually cast it. I think this is great. I really do. I think that I like the design space this explores, the sort of, balance, but these kind of good, not broken balance effects are actually really sweet in white. We've had effects like this in white forever. If your opponent controls more lands than you, go grab a plains or something. And I like that they're exploring that a little bit more to do more things, like draw cards, for instance. It's fair card draw. That's fair card draw. Oh, my opponent has more cards than me. I should draw a card. That's fair. I think for just 2 mana, this card is kind of a home run. I mean, if it ever just puts 2 bodies on the battlefield and draws a card, don't care about the life. I really don't care. If you get it, that's fine. But 2 bodies on the battlefield and a card, awesome. Like, super awesome. So I'm fairly certain this ends up seeing a good amount of play. I just bet you. I know that, again, there are game states where it just does nothing. Right? That's not necessarily something that you want, but in your blue-white control deck, I could see easily engineering a situation where you get the full value out of this card and then start turning the corner. So, huge fan of it. I think it's one of the best cards of the day, no joke. Now we go to the prize for the coolest card of the day, if not the best. Definitely the coolest. This is Hostile here. It's a land that you tap for a colorless mana, or you can pay 1 and tap it and sack a creature to put a soul counter on it. Then, if there are 3 or more soul counters on it, remove those counters, transform it, and untap it. You can only do this as a sorcery for some reason. You get Creeping In. It's a artifact creature, a horror construct, and it's a 3/7. Whenever Creeping In attacks, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, each opponent loses X life, you gain X life, where X is the number of creature cards exiled with Creeping In. And you can pay 4 to have this phase out, mostly for flavor purposes, but it's also good to be able to protect it when your opponent tries to remove it. Especially when you're going to, like, put exile a creature from it, or with it, for that matter. This has to attack a whole bunch of times to actually start, like, really getting value. But after it attacks, like, the 3rd or 4th time, your opponent's probably just dead from taking the drain damage. much less taking the damage from it. But this takes forever to actually transform. Doesn't do a whole heck of a lot in the meantime. Just produces colorless mana. At least it doesn't come into play tap. It costs mana to actually use its sacrifice a creature ability. That's really lame. If this was just a free once per turn sack outlet, there's plenty of ways we could abuse that. But costs mana to use, doesn't give you real mana in the meantime. Takes 4 turns to actually flip over, and when it does, it takes even more turns to actually kill an opponent, right? So I don't think this card is super standard playable unless I'm just really wrong. I mean, the opportunity cost is very low, and opportunity cost is something we talk about a lot. This is a land. You want to play lands anyway, but with that comes the fact that you have to play a ton of creatures that you don't mind sacrificing in kind of a slow roll strategy that you're going to have multiple turns before you can transform this. Like maybe in like a Blood on the Snow type deck that plays, all the stuff like Shambling Ghast and Eye Twitch and Skullport Merchant. Like, that wouldn't be the worst thing, I guess, in the world, because you have creatures to sacrifice. You're going to be resetting the board state anyway, so you don't really mind, sacking dudes. I'm not really sure. I'm trying to justify, like, find a deck this card could be halfway decent in, but I just think that it's way, way too slow. All I want to do is for all of us to gather around and appreciate this flavor. Just do that for me, will you? Here is Adeline, the Splendid Cathar. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 white for a star 4 human knight with vigilance. And its power is equal to the number of creatures you control. Whenever you attack, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. Now there's so much text on this card that I'm not going to show my face for this because I have to keep the card at this size so all the text will fit on it. I hate translating cards. Anyway, this is probably decent, again, and like a Selesnya tokens build, the power on this can get enormous really, really quickly, but it can also, if you don't have much of a board, then it can also create a board whenever you attack. And by the way, note, the way this is translated right now, it's not whenever this attacks, it's whenever you attack. So this creature doesn't have to attack in order to get you a 1/1. And I think that's actually really, really sweet. This reminds me of like a goblin rabble master or something like that, just in white, a little bit harder to cast. I'm not sure how super playable it is in like mono white, especially mono white decks that don't go hella wide. But you want to play like Redain and Elite Spellbinder and Skyclave Apparition. So we've talked about this already with other white 3-drops in the set. How much room do you have for white 3-drops in your deck? Does this really make the cut? I think this probably does make the cut. Again, especially if you are the kind of mono white player that likes to play a lot of those 1-drop creatures. You fill up your 1-drop slot with Ushers and Monk of the Open Hands and more 1-drops even than just that. Like, I can see this actually being a really sweet card that has a lot of power the turn it comes into play. And also creates a dude the turn it comes into play. And maybe if you've got Paladin class going, it creates 2/2s. It's just, there's a lot about this card that I like. And I think that it's probably destined to see some amount of standard play. Even if it doesn't end up in mono white, any tokens build probably wants this card. But I think that there's a better white creature even than that. And that's Sun Gold Sentinel. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 3/2 human soldier. And when it ETBs or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. It's got Coven. You can pay 1 and a white and choose a color. To have Sentinel gain hexproof from that color until end of turn, and it can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. Activate only if you control 3 or more creatures with different power. So this is how you do protection, right? You're not getting protection from a color, but you are, just like protection, able to slip through defenses with a form of protection from that color, and it can't be, killed by stuff. That's actually really, really sweet. And as long as you do have Coven, you can protect this from removal spells. It's kind of got 2 mana regenerate in a way. If your opponent wants to point a removal spell at this, you just pay 2 mana, and suddenly it gets hexproof from whatever color the spell is. So just for 2 mana for your 3/2 that has like these abilities, that's quite good. And just like random graveyard attack value stapled onto it when it ETBs, like. Just a really sick creature that, again, they just kept piling stuff onto to push it, and it is very much pushed. It may not have any truly relevant creature types, except for maybe human. But like for mono white, this doesn't have any creature types that matter or anything like that. Doesn't have any party subtypes. That would have been a little bit too pushed, I think, in some ways. But the value this does bring you for just your 2 mana investment is incredible. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a 2-drop we end up seeing a lot of. Oh, but we also got Delver of Secrets back. Did I tell you that? Did I tell you that we got Delver back, everybody? This is just 1 blue mana for a 1/1 human wizard. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card. If an instant or sorcery card is revealed this way, transform Delver into Insectile Aberration. This is 3 mana, or did I say 3 mana? 3 power, 2 toughness, rather. And it flies. It's a human insect. A human insect. If you've never seen Delver of Secrets, I've just read it for you. I probably don't need to read this card, though. I think a lot of people are relatively familiar with what Delver does. And it's back in Standard, everybody, and we've got plenty of stuff to use. We got the new Shock, we got the new Opt to consider, and a bunch of other reasonably cheap, like, especially 2 mana, but 1 and 2 mana spells that we can cast in this environment right now, so shouldn't be too hard. By the way, we also have MDFCs, like the rise of the Zendikar Rising MDFCs that are like a spell on their front face and then a land on their back face. So it's really easy, like super duper easy to make sure that this flips over on the second, just the next turn that it's in play. And for your 1 mana investment, you get 3/2 flyer, which is still a very good deal, it turns out. So I can't believe they actually did this. I really can't. Of all the things I expected them not to reprint, this was probably in the top 5. And like, they've done it, and it's really hype. And this card's in Historic. This card's in Pioneer now when it wasn't originally. This card's in Standard. Like, somehow this card's in Standard. But this card tends to get better the farther back you go in terms of formats because they have access to the more powerful, cheaply costed spells and stuff. So, you know, the card's probably ridiculously good in older formats, but I think we can probably still make it work in Standard pretty easily. You know, another card that I would have not expected them to reprint like at all, it's probably like number 1 or 2 on my list, was Snapcaster Mage, but they've kind of done that. Bear with me, because I'm going to show you Bloodthirsty Adversary. Yeah, I know, it doesn't have flash. It's not Snapcaster Mage. I get it. Anyway, this is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 vampire with haste, and when it ETBs, you may pay 2 red any number of times. 2 and a red, I should say. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many +1/+1 counters on Bloodthirsty Adversary. Then exile up to that many target instant and or sorcery cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard and copy them. You may cast any number of the copies without paying their mana costs. So this is a really cute callback to Snapcaster, if nothing else. I mean, Blue's version of speed is flash. Red's version of speed is haste. So I like the way they did that, and if you... Look, I know it's not Snapcaster, but it is definitely supposed to be a callback to Snapcaster. Can we all at least agree on that? It is. But anyway, a 2 mana 2/2 haste in red is kind of fine anyway. Like, it's not Robber of the Rich or anything, but like, it's kind of fine anyway. I saw somebody on Reddit earlier say like, oh, the stealing cards with Robber of the Rich didn't even really matter that much. And it's like, what are you smoking? Yes, it does. It mattered constantly. But anyway, I had to get that off my chest because when I saw that comment, I was like, did you ever actually play with Robber of the Rich? You say you did, but did you? Stealing cards was so important with that card. But anyway, 2 mana 2/2 haste is like kind of fine stats in and of itself. It's got a relevant creature type, or what will be a relevant creature type, at least when Crimson Vow comes out. So that's cool. When you pump 5 mana into it, it does disgusting things. Yes, it can only recast a card with converted mana cost 3 or less, but there are a ton of extremely valuable to recast 3 mana cards in the format. And you can cast a 1 or 2 mana card if you want to. You can, but you often want to get the full value out of this. But, you know, if you get like an expressive iteration and recast it, and it's 2 mana, yeah, you lost some mana value on that, but you still feel really good about it. I really don't think that there's going to be any shortage of sweet spells that you want to recast with this guy. And if you do somehow have the 8 mana it would cost to recast 2 spells for free, then like go for it, Hoss. And we got Goldspan Dragons, we got treasure tokens in this format. It's really not as hard to get to 8 as you think it is. You know, we've been casting Magma Opuses naturally for like since at least 2022 standard started, and a little bit before that because people were playing Magma Opuses in the Dragons deck. I mean, if you've ever played Blue-Red, how many times have you just cast a Magma Opus? A billion, right? So it's not actually going to be too hard to get to 8 mana to do this. We've seen worse. We've done it before. But even at 2 mana, I guess it's okay, and at 5 mana, just chef's kiss, sweet spot, you know. So I'm a huge fan of this. I think it is by far the most powerful card of the day. But that's all we got for this spoiler video. There were 30 some odd cards in this one, so please do me a favor, give me a like, give me a subscribe. I started working on this technically 10 o'clock this morning, something like that. And I probably won't have the video out until, I don't know, whatever time it is when you watch this video, like 3 in the morning, something like that. I'm a one-man operation. I'm not like some of the other MTG YouTube channels that cover spoilers and they have, you know, an editor and a person that translates all the cards for them into English and then, you know, puts that translation. No, I do all the translations all myself. I do all the, you know, the sort of reading and imagining all by myself. I don't have a team of people that sits around and table and says like, oh, you know, this is a cool commander combo with this, like other YouTubers have. I don't have any of that. I am just a one-man operation, and I'm working as hard as I possibly can. So if you would, please just throw me a like or a subscribe. That'd be great. Or do any of these things. So you can check me out on Twitch. We're going to be talking a lot more about these spoilers in the next couple of days over there. We'll cover some spoilers the day they happen, and we'll talk more about sort of what we're most excited about in this set. What this set sort of means for Standard. We'll do that all on Twitch. So check me out over there. And then if you really want to support the channel, check me out on Patreon. $1 a month is all I really ask from you, and that'll let you vote on what content we do once this set goes live. So check out all that stuff, but I have got to get editing. I'm pretty sure that I'm very close to the end of my camera's memory card's memory. Yeah, that's how you English. Anyway, I love you guys. Just let me know how you felt about all this stuff down there in the comment section. My takes, anything that I missed, all that stuff. It's one of the most important parts of spoiler season is putting our heads together, right? So get down there. I read your comments. I truly do. And I will see y'all very soon. I am Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.